that if we don't get a chance to talk about the stories for that week, it doesn't mean that like the quiz won't happen. Because in this class, the quiz is purely based on the facts of the readings. It's not going to have any of. I've decided it's just not going to have any of what we've talked about in class added to it. It's just going to be like plot points and things like that. So it's just basically a way to tell that you've read. That's all what it's going to be. And so I want to make that after we talk about it, so you still have a chance to catch up on readings if you're a little behind and still do the discussion post. But just because we don't talk about the readings in class doesn't mean that we're not going to have the quiz on it. So that's always still going to happen.
That works.
Yes?
Okay, so I have a question about that pretest that we had to take.
Yeah.
Isn't that like, okay, what do you know, and then learn, and then, yeah, why do we get graded on that?
Yeah, I actually had a question about that from somebody in 1301 as well. It did the same thing to them. The pretest actually has a numerical score upon which it factors into their lab average, which makes no sense to me. That's like let's see what you know, and then what you make counts as your grade, which I don't understand. So I'm either going to. The thing is, I still need to make it count, but I don't know like how to make it award you like the full point. If nothing else, at the very end of the semester, like what I'll end up having to do. I mean, I may even just do this like soon, but if the post test is the same way, what I'm just going to do is make neither one of those count toward the lab average because.
It's not the actual labs.
Right. I mean, tell me, did you have to do the pretest before we'd let you do anything else?
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't let you enter anything
else. Oh, well, then I'm not even going to make it count. Because if that's the case, I mean, I can just turn off the pretest's grade, but if it's not letting you do anything in it until you've done it.
First, like, click on it to launch and get it to link to Blackboard, like, that's all it'll let you
Yeah.
do. And even if you, like, submit it and save it for later or whatever,
yeah.
like, it starts right where you left off and you have to finish it.
Like, what I have is this average column. Okay, I have an average column here, and, like, it averages all the grades from this things that I tell it to use. And so I have this box here with all the grades for all the labs. And basically, I just take them all and I put them over here in the average column and say, use these to average. But somebody's already done that for me. If I just take the one that says pretest and say, never mind, don't use this one, it'll still create the average just based on the rest of them. So it shouldn't even be a very difficult thing for me to do. What was difficult for me to do was to rearrange the grade book.
I just read your
Good Lord. Yeah, that I'm going to have to move one piece at a time, one column at a time, and like hit save. Like it's a nightmare. Like just doing the little bit that I did that y'all saw, like getting rid of the old labs, that was the easy bit, and that still took about 15 minutes. It was insane, but I'll still get it done. I'm not doing any actual grading until Friday. I'm going to do some editing of the videos and start grading essays on Friday. But tonight I plan on, this afternoon, doing all that other stuff that I have on a list in my office.
But are you going to assign us our new essay?
That's going to happen today, yeah. It's going to happen today. In fact, I'll have to sit down and probably be sitting down for most of the time while we talk about it. So I apologize if you prefer to see me stand because you like my statuesque figure. Well, when I say I mean statuesque, but with a potato in the middle. Oh, I don't even have that on yet, do I?
No.
Makes me wonder, like sometimes, like I'm watching watching Big Brother, and like on a live episode, they'll have suddenly Julie Chen's mic cuts out for a second, like the host, and then they go like, "Get it together, CBS." And I'm sitting there thinking, I like can't even remember to turn like a projector. I don't even know how they make the shows. Like I literally don't know how does a live show even happen. You got one person in a room going, "This camera, this camera, this camera, this camera, this camera." I'm like, how do they even? It's like multitasking on a whole new level. Let's see. Connect. That was all an excuse for me to waste time until that thing got working. Next. Okay, so we have Blackboard. What's going as Magnus Baraka. Magnus Baraka, you are a cool guy. Yes. Didn't I show y'all? Doesn't everybody know the origin of Magnus Baraka?
Oh, yeah, you did show us last year.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that. It's been a long time.
Yeah, well, we won't go through it again. We don't have time. But if you'd like to see, I can show you later. Let's see. English 1302 is our class, correct? Is that too big? It feels so large. Or is that good to see?
No, that's
okay. Go over here to assignments. And you'll see the new one has been added up here. Those who are having trouble submitting the essay, there's a couple of hints I'll give you. One, this is where you see how to do it. This is where you see how to do it in Microsoft Word. So it's got two versions, PDF, Microsoft Word. To actually submit the assignment, a lot of people are having this issue. You click literally on the title. Boop. And then that takes you, it doesn't look like a link. but it's a link. And then from there, it has like the browse computer, find the file, and that kind of stuff. Now, if you use Google Docs, there's whole kinds of different concerns, and I can show you all that after class if you need. Because you might have to like export to PDF instead of Microsoft Word, because Microsoft Word provides problems. But for this right now, we're just going to go to critical evaluation, whole new type of essay, way different than what we've done before. Let us learn. Same as before, pick any reading from the course. Well, actually, the other one said you had to pick anything in the first 4 weeks, the fiction readings for Essay 1. This one, you can pick anything from the beginning to the end, as long as it's green. Any of the green readings. So it's assigned today, do week 5, day 2. It can, of course, be revised as many times as you want after that, if you don't like your grade, but that's when it's due. I'm going to kind of be reading this and also talking about it as I go. It's a confusing concept to write down on paper. It makes the most sense when we see the sample essay, but I'm going to try to talk about it in sort of a folksy, real world, real people talk, real talk way. Only one person giggled at real talk. Come on. I'm about to give you all the tea. Is that right? Did I use that correctly?
Yeah.
Big T truth. Is that correct? No shade, though. So if you don't get it, I'm not going to make you feel bad about it. No tea. No, actually, no, I can't remember how to say that stuff anymore. It's been too long. Been too long. Here we go. So you're going to write a critical evaluation essay for a specific aspect of that particular literary reading. The critical evaluation should unfold or unpack the meaning and workings of a literary text by looking at a very small selection, like a sentence or a phrase, maybe even a word, but not merely the title of the story, from the work, and analyzing that piece in context of the author's purpose and or the text as a whole. So essentially, say, one of the stories we've read, you're going to pick a sentence that you think, this one was really kind of important thematically to the story in a way that maybe isn't so obvious. You're going to say, this is the one. You're going to explain in the essay how that sentence was so important to the story. Not plot-wise. I don't want you to say, if this sentence was removed from the story, Emily never dies. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm talking about thematically, the meaning of the story. This sentence was put here by the author to really enhance.
So symbolism, metaphors, all of that.
Yeah, it might include all of those things kind of within it. Doesn't have to go that particular route, but it can.
But it's going to be analyzed basically.
Yeah, it's very, very analytical.
In a science way.
In a sciencey way, yes. And because of that, your essay should have a strong thesis, and the rest of the paper should clearly support that thesis. So in the other paper, not really a strong thesis. You could kind of talk about whatever you felt like talking about. This one, while this thesis is somewhat obvious, it's this piece is incredibly important to the meaning of the whole. And that's a relatively easy thesis to construct. It still has to be very, very strong. You try to provide compelling thoughts about the themes and subject matter, as well as show true insight through closely reading that one small piece. Try not to go with super obvious stuff only. I mean, you'll need to cover the basics of what you're talking about. We didn't read the Story Minister's Black Veil, but I'm sure in some way the veil, you're going to talk about how it's a symbol of the separation between the preacher and the people. Because we talked about that at the beginning of class, right? Because you'll just assume people know that, and you'll have to think of other more complicated things. Things you think others might not have thought of. That's why I call it critical. It's an exercise in critical thinking. I really want you stretching the mind's possibilities here. However, I don't want you to analyze the author's ideas from a personal standpoint. In other words, do not offer your opinion on whether the author is ultimately right or wrong about the values or ideas he or she is trying to convey. Be objective and analytical. So, in a story like The Yellow Wallpaper, you would say, this bit right here is incredibly important to pushing forward the themes of how dangerous the patriarchy is for women, or how women aren't respected and women's medical health is in danger. What you won't say is, and Gilman is right about that. Or Gilman tells us what we need to know. Or Gilman's opinions are incredibly prescient and needed in society today. I mean, we should have no idea.
Completely unbiased.
Yes. We should have no idea what your personal opinions are on this topic if we read this paper. You should be able to write a paper about a story about, and this is an extreme example, there's a book called Lolita, essentially about a pedophile, written from the perspective of a pedophile. Generally regarded as one of the great American classics, but nobody has their students read it because we'd all be burned at the stake by you. You're like, the book, if usually what students say is the book was absolutely beautiful and incredibly well written, and I'm really pissed off about that. You know? Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. He's a Russian who wrote the whole book in English, and he's better at English than any of us are. The guy could speak out loud like a textbook. Like, I've heard his speeches before. Like, they have the speeches recorded.
So like Discovery Channel narrator kind of thing?
Right, but it's like the kind of words it takes people time to write down, because they're like, I can't think of those words on the fly because they're too big. He could just say. He had a working vocabulary that was abnormal.
So should this paper
But
be almost in a sense
you should be able to write a whole paper about a guy saying, like a character who is a pedophile, and never in the paper anywhere should you ever betray the fact that you think pedophiles are bad. As hard as that might be, you would still need to not even let anybody know exactly. You couldn't use words like gross or anything that's an emotional sounding word.
Especially if
you could use obvious things like the author would be talking about, like taking advantage of his situation, that don't imply emotion but still are factually correct. So just don't let your personal.
Don't give opinions on it, pretty much.
Right. You can show what you can show through the text and the proof you find within the text, but no personal opinions on the topic itself
almost
from
like
your.
no outside information. Space.
Right. Basically, all the discussions that we have in class out loud, no room for any of that in this.
Okay.
Because those kind of things we talk about are what we feel about it. That's not what this is about. Next. Think of this almost like a dissection, so science-y way was kind of right, in which you're trying to discover the many purposes and achievements of one small organ within a full organism, and then fully inspect the piece that you choose. Think of this as like the whole story is like a person laying dead on the table, and you're doing a dissection, and you're going to like dissect just this one piece. You're going to take one piece out. You want to kind of not make your goal, because I'll tell you right now, like if you go, this is going to be way easier if I go pick a poem. It's not. Because to me, the small piece you choose has to be relative to the whole. So in the story, you'd want to choose like a sentence, maybe two, probably not. A sentence or a phrase is best in a story. In a poem, like say a 14-line poem, you'd pick one word. If I saw any more than that, I would be like, they're lazy. Because the point is to do something hard. The point is not to make this as easy as possible. If you pick 4 lines of a 14-line poem, you're like, these lines are really essential. Well, yeah, they are. If you take them out, 30% of the poem's gone.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know you said this like a while ago.
Uh-huh.
The critical evaluation can't be over a same story that was picked for any of our synthesis analysis, right?
Synthesis analysis, yes. You can go on and write, you go, oh, I really liked writing this paper. I'll use this for the research paper. That's okay. You just can't
Has
do
to be
anything you've
completely
already.
separate from anything else.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, think of this like, I always think like, you don't really want to go for something that like, you look at the body on the table and say, I have determined that, let us cut it off, the head is very important to the function of the human body. Duh. You know, that's going to be like your 4 lines of a 14-line poem. eye might be better, but a little too obvious. Like the eye is really important to the function. Well, because you have to see to then interact with things, and then so yeah, it's pretty important. Nose might be a little better, like maybe smell or. I'd say if you wanted to get really good though, go with something like somebody pointed out the other day, like kidney.
Or the liver.
Or a liver, or really fancy, like a lymph node. Where you're like the lymph node's incredibly important to the function of the human body. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't. And they're, what? Why? And you're like, little bitty, but take a look at this.
Or
And like you're like, huh?
Your
Adrenal glands,
probably the
yeah.
most important in a way.
Yeah. So something small most people wouldn't even normally notice and think, well, that can't matter. You don't want to pick something that's quite literally like, what's the thing that we can just remove? Nobody really needs it. Appendix. Like, don't pick the appendix. Be like, this is super important.
It was when we
Look,
were-
if we the word the what? That's not important. Like, and don't pick something that's so obvious like the title. Like, I feel like the wallpaper is incredibly important to the yellow wallpaper. Well, of course it is. It's the central metaphor. Or just pick a sentence that has the wallpaper in it, so that you're like, oh look, without the wallpaper. Try to go with something more.
So is that
It's less
because
obvious, I
I already
guess.
wrote my paper over that, so I can't use that.
The yellow paper? Oh, yeah. I think that would almost be a hard one to write about because all the things you could choose from are so obvious.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I picked it for my first.
Oh, I thought I saw a hand you're stretching, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But is that what you're wanting us to do? Is it use the lines as our thesis?
You're basically saying this piece is incredibly important. You basically go all have the same thesis with a different insert here. This piece is incredibly important to creating this meaning in the story. And you can make those meaning, and I'll show you the sample. It'll probably make it easier. I hope that you're able to tell kind of so far that this paper is essentially the opposite of a census analysis. Like, what is it? Was it that she says in Frozen? Conceal, don't feel. Like that. Don't let them know. Oh, now they know. You've never seen Frozen?
Never seen Frozen? It's probably good that you.
How old are your kids?
Mine?
Yeah.
7, but they're boys.
I guess that makes sense.
One of them 7, one's about.
So you watched a lot of Incredibles.
Yes.
Um,
I'm that kind of person.
Never seen The Incredibles?
No, I don't listen to that.
Sweet baby Jesus.
Yeah, no.
Okay, well that's something that you.
They've not seen Sweet Baby Jesus either.
So I have a question. If we already, so we can't use the same for both,
Right.
Right.
Okay.
For both the first 2 essays.
so we can't.
No.
No.
Because and the reason for that is I want you to have to write about at least 3 works of
Okay, but I have a
literature
question.
throughout the class.
So
Yeah.
after we've already written this paper, we can no longer use that reading for anything else. Is that what I'm getting out of it? Like if we choose a story for this, but we want to write it about our census analysis 2 paper, we can't do that. Okay. that's
Well, I
what-
mean, census analysis 2, you can only write about Antigone for that one anyway.
Well, that was just an example. I mean,
Right, yeah. True. You can't be like critical evaluation Antigone and then census analysis 2. In fact, nobody I guess can write their critical evaluation about Antigone. I had not realized that before. It's not possible because you have to write census analysis 2 about it. Oh, I never realized that. I guess I should add that. The only one that I have that's off limits here is Rose Frimley
Why?
sample paper.
Okay.
Spoiler alert: you're not going to write your paper on Rose Frimley as good as this person did.
No, probably not because
I hate to.
we kind of all agreed that one was all over the place. So.
Yeah, this person, the sample essay, I tend to like it quite a bit. The only reason you'd have to use a works cited page on this is if you did not read the book from, if you did not read your story from the book. If you read it online, only the works cited page showing what website. And it's going to need to say like Faulkner, William, in quotes, Rose Frimley, unquote, and then the website information necessary to show like where it was.
Oh, so it can be any. It doesn't have to be something that you've assigned to us to read.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying if somebody read the story on a website that they were supposed to read from that book, I would need you to say where you read it. because you noticed there was some discrepancies in Story of an Hour that we read online. There were some little mistakes here and there, and I would need to know if there was some major plot point that had been changed because some goofball decided to publish the story online for free, but with major plot changes. I should do that.
No.
Yeah. It would be hilarious because then if one of your
Call it
students
Free
actually
Lit
signed
Web,
it-
and it's for teachers,
Do
and we
it.
get permission from all the publishers, and we say, can we publish like versions of your stories online that have like major plot differences to throw students off in schools?
You should do it.
And like it's the first thing that pops up on Google, they'd be like,
You should
do it,
do it.
do
Do
it.
it.
So you're
Do it.
forced to purchase? Yes.
Because in all honesty, students.
Because I've already got the idea of making spork notes. Have I told you about that?
Oh no.
It'd be like Spark Notes, but it'd be Sport Notes, so people could not even notice there's a difference. And so you click there and you go, and it would be like Spark Notes, but it would be based on those free lit web stories that you find. So like it would be like, say, here's the plot point. You're like, that's what I read, so I guess it's right. And then you go, ah!
You should do it.
Oh, I totally should.
I love the idea.
I would make like so much money.
I was about to say, you make a lot of
You
money.
can quit your job.
My brother knows.
No,
how to
I like
make
my
websites.
It's funny though.
It would, in fact, it's a weird thing. Like if I did that and made so much money that I could quit my wife would probably make me quit my job. But then all the joy of seeing what happened from my job,
True.
it would go away.
Yeah.
So it'd be like a catch-22. It's like either I teach and I don't get to ever see that come to play, or I have to do that for the rest of my life and never get to see the results. Oh, I'd be so sad. Somebody else will have to invent it then. But it'd be fun to rewrite stories. So, I really don't want you to use outside sources for this assignment. The reason is I call it a critical evaluation because I want you to be critically thinking. I want you to have to stretch your mind and think of how far you think this line could go, how far you think this piece could be stretched to relate to the whole story. I want you making those connections. I don't want you to just go and report to me what somebody else said this symbolism of this story is. That's not what I want at all. I feel like that's boring. I feel like that negates the purpose of the class. It's actually really interesting in China right now. Like they've had for a long time a problem with cheating, and not only is cheating a problem there, but like literally in ways that like you couldn't maybe even fathom here. Like we have like websites, you know, where you can on the low key like go buy like an essay for a course. Like there's literally an entire industry there where like there are people who you hire who will write your entrance essays for college and like write your essays in school. And then like, because to in that culture, the only thing that matters is getting into college and getting the degree. Literally the learning is almost like irrelevant to many of the people who are there. They're like, I just got to get that degree. And so to me, I feel like I don't want this class to just turn into that. Where like you're writing an essay and you're like, as long as I can find somebody who said the
You
thing
want us to get something.
that I'm supposed to have said. I mean, I want you coming up with these things on your own. I want you to think about the literature. That's my main goal. Not to go find what somebody else said about it. Because I find that to be boring, and even if I never could tell, even if for some reason you were able to cheat on every single paper and you never came up with an original thought, even if I gave you an A in the class because I had no idea, I would still feel like it was a complete waste of your time.
So if I just come up to you.
Even if you got like,
semester,
as opposed to if you got like an A just doing it on your own. Even if I didn't like the stuff as much.
What
What?
if I just came up to you at the end of the semester and told you that I cheated all my essays?
I mean, first of all, I'd have to investigate it. I mean, I can't just take your word. You might just be having a bad day. Right? And you're like, I just want to piss him off. I cheated on everything. And I'd be like, prove it. Wouldn't that be weird? Teacher saying, prove to me you cheated. Yeah. So let us go now. Again, I don't want us to just regurgitate things I've said in class. I hate just reading my words said to me, like written to me on paper. Or like, wow, I came up with this on my own. Like, no, we literally talked about that in class. Like, that's what we said. But I can. You can sometimes tell when people use your exact words. Like this, sometimes it's up. I don't know. I feel like that doesn't happen very often, so I'm not going to harp on that. One of the easiest ways to do this is by picking something where you feel like the individual words in the selection are really packed with meaning, and then breaking down those individual words. And that's kind of the way that the sample paper approaches it. So we'll sort of talk about that here. I'm going to kind of take you through the process of how I grade the essay, because I think that'll help make sense of why I'm reading it the way that I'm reading it. So here's the quote that she chose from Rose Frimley. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores.
So can we do that for ours? Or...
No, you can't do that.
No, not Rose for Emily, but like say our club top like that.
Yeah. In fact, I want everybody's to look just like this, where you've got title, then the author, title of the story, then in bold, the selection you've chosen, and then down below, you begin the essay.
So
I should know everybody's quote from the very beginning.
We don't put our selection in our thesis.
Not the whole thing in your thesis. No, essentially, you've got it above, and then you just sort of reference that in the essay. Because I think it functions better that way instead of shoving the whole thing into the first paragraph. It just doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. So, most of the time I see these essays, maybe some of you have gone ahead and read Soldier's Home for next week, but Soldier's Home has this sentence that's famous that says, I think it's something like, he stared at the bacon fat hardening on the plate. It's well known in literature. He just, like, his mom made him some bacon. He just stares at the bacon hardening because he won't eat it. And it's sort of, people have gone like, oh, that's sort of a metaphor, a symbol for life, or something, or like what he was going through. Very famous sentence. And usually what I get is famous sentences. That's all I see. And so this one, my first response was, that's not in there. I don't remember that. So I had to go, this is what I do. Usually is to verify if I can't remember the sentence. I was like, okay, what's the most, let's see, first of all, Rose for Emily full text. Click. William Faulkner, yeah, looks right. Okay, so let's see. What's the most original word there? Coquettish. Second paragraph. What? And so I open my book up and I'm like, no effing way. Was it 4 something? 479, 465, 477. Was it 496? 497? Yes. Good call. So second paragraph on 498, first line of the story. It was a big squarish frame house that had once been white, decorated with cupolas and spires and scrolled balconies in the heavily lightsome style of the 70s, set on what had once been our most select street. Yep, house description. But garages and cotton gins had encroached and obliterated even the August names of that neighborhood. Only Miss Emily's house was, so it's not even the whole sentence, it's just part of it. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. Huh. There it is. So sure enough, she wasn't lying. There it is. I did for the first time just now, because sometimes our brains delete insignificant words, realize that she made a mistake. Cotton wagons and the gasoline pumps is what it should say. If I'd caught that now, she wouldn't get the grade she got. I cannot believe it's taken me literally 6 years to catch this. Is that crazy?
Wow.
My brain was just ignoring the word the. Anyway, it's not that important a word anyway in this particular context. But I see the sentence and I go, okay, I guess it's in there. I never realized that, but whatever. So she was one of the few students who gave me something I didn't even recognize. Makes me start off a little skeptical. I'm like, I don't really see much here. I see, like, what's she going to tell me? House symbolism? It's a symbol for her. I mean, I think that's kind of an obvious one. I feel like that's the obvious way to go, is that, the house is a symbol for Miss Emily because it's old in the neighborhood and so is she, right?
Probably did it on purpose, like to see it.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. So I'm very skeptical going in. And sometimes that does happen with you guys. So sometimes I'll start reading, I'm like, I don't know. Not just on this essay, sometimes a lot of essays, but it's all about what you can do to convince me. She says, from the very beginning of the story, his short story, Faulkner alludes to the emphasis on the symbolism of the house and its owner, as well as foreshadows what will happen later on in the story. Faulkner does all of this through a small description depicting a part of the story's setting. The simple sentence introduces why the house Miss Emily occupies is one of the most important symbols throughout the story. Okay, so yeah, symbolism of the house. It's kind of what I was expecting. I don't expect to see much more than that through the course of this essay, but let's see if she can surprise me. By the way, Magnus Baraka is a female in this case. She just is. In the words preceding the chosen phrase above, the environment around the house is described. Yeah, it's especially important to notice how the description of the atmosphere around the house is new and progressive, whereas the house itself is a complete contrast to that ideal. Simply put, the house does not fit into the surroundings. It does not belong with the ambiance of the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. The house sticks out in what most people in the town would agree to be a displeasing way. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much standard. But I do like one thing she's doing so far. I really like this. Does anybody know what I really like? Believe it or not many people do this, and I really would like if they did, is when she's talking about what she means, she's mentioning the quotation from the quotation, the bit that she's talking about. Like she's saying, see, it does not belong with the ambiance of the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. She doesn't just leave it at, it doesn't fit with the new stuff. She literally goes back and references her quote to show what she means and how this sentence is relevant. Because you're making this sentence relevant. And so that should be your job the whole time. Make this sentence relevant. This sentence important.
We should be referencing a lot.
Yeah, you should be going back and referencing a lot. And I mean, I should see you quoting a word from your, phrase at least once a paragraph. I think personally. Maybe I don't know if she does, but it just seems like that's a good idea. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So she doesn't fit in. Got it. Down below, the house represents Miss Emily herself. She is seen as an outcast in her town, specifically in the time period where most young women were out getting married and starting families, because she is known as being a recluse. To the townspeople, Miss Emily is seen as an eyesore, and she's quoting Ken, eyesore. As most people would conclude, eyesores tend to be popular topics of discussion. This is ironic, given that even though the townspeople would rather personally ignore exceptions to their social ideals, it is in their nature to publicly confer about it, thus giving Miss Emily's seemingly insignificant way of living an even greater significance. It does not help that they already set themselves apart from her because of her family's history of being in a higher social status. Okay, this is a little better than I was expecting. So it's not just she represents the house and how the house is an eyesore. It's that she's mixing class in there as well, talking about how there's a class difference in the higher social status. Additionally, there's a very profound idea here, and anytime, like if I'm sitting in my chair and I'm grading, and my brain wants to pick me up and start thinking about it while I stand, that's a good thing. That means you might. I'm impressed because my brain wanders and I think about the ideas here. But it is kind of true. Did we talk about this? And I feel like Brandon, I feel like you're the one who mentioned a train wreck the other day. Did you? And you said it's kind of like a train wreck where you can't look away. Was that right?
It's like a train wreck. You want to look away, but you can't.
Yes. And what was that in reference to? I can't remember. Battle Royal?
Yeah.
Yes. It's similar to that idea where she's pointing out that Emily is regarded and her house is regarded as sort of an eyesore, right? She's that person in the town. And you're like, her. But people spend a lot of time looking and wondering, and they can't get their minds off of her, right? It's almost just like it's constantly pervading their thoughts. And I find that to be an interesting idea that she hits, is that we do tend to almost crave having somebody to talk about that we consider outside the social order. Isn't that strange? It's a very strange thing about us. And she clarifies a little bit more about that idea in the next paragraph, I believe.
Like basically all we talk about is how to.
Yeah, it's almost like, while we probably shouldn't want train wrecks, we kind of wait for them. And then once they're there, we're like, let's talk about it. And like, let's keep talking about it and be like, man, that stupid train wreck. But the whole time, if the train wreck was gone, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. And she says the house's stubborn and coquettish description is how the town views Miss Emily. Even though they know she is a nice girl of significant upbringing and background, her solitary lifestyle is not a common one of the time, and because she has shown no signs of changing it, they assume she is obstinate in living that way. Her reclusive behavior then becomes an almost accepted part of the society, if only because it provides something to talk about. Just as the house stands out amongst its industrial surroundings, the people cannot change it, so instead they find entertainment at its expense. That's a very compelling thought. They especially find pleasure in the fact that without her father around to keep her a well-rounded young lady, she has brought her family's name down from its status. Very much like how the house was once a regal portion of the neighborhood and now stands as a blemish to the town. We like to see people fail. What do you say, suffer? Yeah. there's something, especially somebody who comes down from greatness. I don't know what, there's a societal thing where, somebody who was once doing really well now isn't, and we're like, they deserve
Especially if they tried to like rub it like the way Emily and her father did. They kind of held their heads high like they were better than everybody
Mhm.
else. So when they fall, everybody else is happier because it kind of shows that they're not better than them.
We love to see like every movie, like teen movie, right? Where like there's the preppy girl who's mean to like the normal everyday girl who nobody realized was beautiful. We see her be mean to her the whole movie, right? And then like she gets like, I don't know, a pie on her, or somebody spills a drink on her.
And it's really satisfying.
And we're like, yes, because that girl who had it better than everybody else now for a moment doesn't, and you're like, haha. Granted, she'll still get into a better college, because her parents are going to buy her in, but what are you going to do about that? And she'll probably end up still having a more attractive husband and mostly a better life. But I'm joking. I'm extrapolating based on the way things really work in society. Yes.
It's like the opposite of the underdog effect.
Yes. Yeah. We root for the underdog, but in the case of no underdog, you're saying that kind of like an overdog, where if somebody's overdogging it too much, we just want to bring them down. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Exactly. If somebody's too much winning, we want them to lose. Okay. Or if somebody won for too long, we want them to lose. So in this case too, like I think of like y'all probably in whatever town you live in have somebody who's like this. The one I can think of in Greenville is there's that girl who walks around like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. That's the way she walks, and she's skinny, blonde, and talks to herself, laughs at herself. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Yeah. Everybody knows who she
She
is.
used to come to the mall all the time, and she would always walk into my store every day, and then just walk around and not say anything.
She laughs and she's like just having a conversation, but there's nobody there. And she
She's
just laughs
completely
at herself.
insane.
Yeah.
She's gone nuts.
At Hastings, we had interesting, when I used to work at Hastings, we had interesting calls. Like, people would come up to the front and they'd say, listen, there's this girl over here talking to herself and laughing at herself. Can y'all ask her to leave? It's like, it's not a leavable offense. Like, you can't tell you that. The worst ones, too, was like, he would say, there's a girl who's, like, sitting over there in a chair, and we're like, and she's not wearing any underwear? Yes. And we're like, sorry, we can't. America, it's her right, I guess. It's like, unless she's like taking her pants completely off, like we can't. Somebody, unfortunately, you just kind of have to move, I guess. It's just, and she wears like almost nothing everywhere. I mean, it's like always, all the time. It's spaghetti straps that you're like, I didn't realize spaghetti straps could be so spaghetti-like. Like there really is almost nothing. And it's sushi, but everybody, it's like, if we have like the situation we had in Commerce, I feel like when she once upon, like later goes away, everybody will lose that like those stories to tell, right? Mm-hmm. Like in Commerce, we had Buck Lucky. He was part of the Lucky family in Commerce, I think a well-known family. I went to high school with the guy, and I think his actual name is Buck Lucky, but he always would walk real slow, kind of shuffle step around the town, and I don't know, it's genius, but the frat guys, I think in some frat, came up with this theory that they said, oh, well, it's good luck. They came up with a mythology, essentially. They said it's good luck to buy Buck Lucky a beer. And so at some point, Buck Lucky was always seen around town with a paper sack. And he'd be walking around town with a paper sack, shuffling. And there's all these people saying like, oh, I don't want Buck Lucky to have, those beers walking around town. It's like sending a bad message to the kids. Me, personally, I was like, I love Buck Lucky. I loved him because it was like, he was always around town. You could like go in, you could talk to him, say hi and stuff. And it was sort of like part of the definition of the town and what the town was. Just like with Emily. And when you take that away, what is the town? What is Rose Friendly without Emily? It's nothing. The town is nothing. It's basic. It's normal again. It is those eccentricities. It is those outliers that sometimes define us. And so I thought, yeah, it gives it character. Otherwise, it's characterless and bland and concrete and straight lines like everything else is. It's the suburban neighborhoods where every house is exactly the same, and you have to go to somebody's house because they invite you over, and you're like, I literally can't figure out which one's which.
Now you're getting into that one movie about the housewives, and they end up turning into robots. What's that called? Stepford Housewives.
Oh, Stepford Wife, yeah. Isn't the movie just called Stepford?
I have no idea.
I can't remember.
just watched it randomly on TV.
So this was a really compelling idea. This is probably enough for her to get an A at this point because I'm like impressed enough with the depth to which she took the symbolism of the house. That probably would give like 95, maybe 96 or 97 even, because I'm impressed enough with the idea. Then down below, she continues. Although the word decay seems to be an insignificant part of the sentence, upon further inspection it becomes very striking. The story ends with the revealing of the rotting corpse of Miss Emily's ex-fiancé, her sick personal keepsake of her lover. After reading the end of the story and going back to the phrase describing the house, readers can find that there was obviously more to it than just not fitting in. The decay in the sentence not only displays that it was an old house on the outside, but also represents what will literally be inside the house, a decaying body. In going with the symbolism of the house, it could also represent that Emily herself had decay, which would be her obviously corrupted mind for thinking it was acceptable to poison someone to death to be able to keep them forever. This blew my mind. This blew me away. I was like, read the story a number of times and never even thought about the word decay. But I want to tell you right now that authors put a lot of thought into stuff. I could have sworn a couple of years ago when reading Stephen King's book on writing that he talked about, the subtitle is A Memoir of the Craft. So he's essentially talking about what it's like to write. One part's biography, the next part is like how he writes, like what he does.
He does
And
that at the beginning of the book that I'm reading.
he's the beginning of your writing right now too. He talks about, I think, how many words he hopes to produce per day, and he has a great work ethic. It's like he writes from like I think 8 to 11 or 8 to noon. Then he takes like a break. Then he comes back, edits from like I think 1 to 3 what he's written. Then he calls it a day. So he essentially writes from 8 to 3 with like a little lunch break in the middle. And I think I could have sworn he said that he hopes to produce maybe 400 to 800 good words per day. So in all of his writing, like all day, he hopes to produce maybe as much as y'all had to write for your synthesis and essay, maybe less. So he like labors over those words for hours creating the story.
That's the way his writing is. That's what makes him such a good author.
Yeah, that's why he's so readable. I think.
Everything is like that.
Yeah, everything is like it's a page turner. But with people who are laboring so hard on their words, that's for novels even. With short stories, it's a smaller form. It's almost considered like the poetry of prose writing. You're going to be laboring over your words even more. You got to know that when the first word of this story happens, Faulkner already knows that Emily has killed her lover. He knows that. The whole story is out of chronological order, so we had the story planned from the beginning of what the timeline was, when this needs to happen in the story so that I'm able to conceal that she's the one who killed him, or that she killed him. And so he knows going into that second paragraph that there is a decaying body in the house. So when he uses the word decay, it's not an accident. The sentence could have easily said, only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting a stubborn and coquettish disrepair above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps and eyesore among us. He didn't put disrepair. He easily could have. It means the same thing. Instead, he put the word decay, knowing that what we see at the end of the story is going to be a decaying body. So it's not haphazardly thrown in. Authors make choices for words. He chooses the word stubborn. He chooses the word coquettish. Your job is essentially to say that these words as chosen, and to assume that these words as chosen were chosen for their specific meaning, their specific relationship to everything else in the story. And so when she says that this word decay is meant to be a very, very subtle bit of foreshadowing, maybe just setting tonally the idea that decay is going to be something in this story, then we're prepared, our minds are prepared that decay is coming,
it is. It's
and it happens.
The whole story just talks about the smell. And all
Yes. The sense of decay pervades the whole story. And so it's just one more bit of foreshadowing, and probably the first bit of foreshadowing we see that that's what ends up happening. So this literally blew me away. To get one compelling thought is what I hope for in an essay. To get two compelling thoughts was like, and I never even thought that the foreshadowing started happening that early. It never would have occurred to me. So this is, I put her conclusion's pretty decent because she tries to say as much as she said before, but it's all relatively new sounding and doesn't sound like she's just saying the same thing. It says the irony is that Miss Emily was ostracized for being different, but the way people thought she was different turned out to be relatively normal compared to the reality of what she was like. Faulkner designed the phrase, and I like that word, designed the phrase, only Miss Emily's house was left, ... an eyesore among eyesores. So she shortens it so she doesn't have to say the whole thing again with the ... To perfectly represent how Miss Emily's house and herself are tied together, both literally from her living in it, and symbolically by the way the house is snubbed by the people of the town, as well as these stubborn and decay aspects both the house and Miss Emily possess. So she's trying to like wrap up all her. It does honestly get a little busy there at the end because she's trying to like say so much in so little space. She probably didn't have to do all that, but I appreciate that she tried. But this is one of the rare circumstances where you'll see a sample paper that has a 100. So I gave this paper a 100. Even though some of you might have problems with but she used the non-standard spelling of ambiance. To be dead honest, this is the first time I noticed that the quote was wrong. I would not give it 100 now. In fact, I might have to go back and change the sample just so I can keep telling people I gave this paper 100. You'll probably actually see that change maybe tonight. But it was only 678 words. She's incredibly efficient with what she wrote, even though it's did I say 600 to 800 words? She gives me a lot in a little space. Yeah. And it's more about the quality of the ideas, not giving me a huge list of things, but really spending time talking about the few things she does discuss.
So like our purpose should be wanting to expand your thoughts.
I want you. Yeah. I mean, I think your goal should be to.
Because that's what critical thinking is.
Yeah. I mean, it's to expand your thoughts, to stretch your mind in a way you didn't think the story could make it stretch, and to find so much meaning by looking at this little small piece. I mean, it's almost like, you should consider it like you pointed your telescope at some blank spot in the sky, and through enough fiddling, you discovered a galaxy. You thought nothing was there, and now you found... Heather's like, your metaphor is absurd. I'm not going to find that much.
Oh no, I probably won't either.
No, you won't either.
I'm gonna struggle.
So no
Like-
I? Like we can't use the word I?
No.
Okay.
None of that. There is a way of checking. In fact, I'm probably going to go change this as well.
I mean, I analyze a lot of stuff, but...
Like one way to check on your paper, it's easy to check your paper. Like if you just say I, you can notice that the only time I appears in the paper is when I'm writing it. So she didn't actually use it in her paper at all. So it's an easy way to just go back and check yours with the Control F function, or the find function.
Third person, reference to the reader and the writer, not the...
Yep. No, I, me, my, us, ourselves, we, us. I already said us. You, yours, none of that stuff. Yourselves, ourselves. We don't have time to talk about a story. We'll have to move all discussion next week. So y'all can start thinking about the critical evaluation. I will show you in more detail how I might approach one from start to finish around the day that it's due.
What day exactly?
It's 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today, it'd be due. It's probably going to be another situation where your papers aren't going to be the first ones that are graded, though. So, oh wait, but it's weekday 2, so yeah. I was going to say, well, if it's Tuesday, you can wait till Thursday, but it's not a Tuesday; it's a Thursday. So, yeah, y'all have a good one.